I climbed inside the bottle to give my brains a rest. The world should change so quickly. I'm sure it's for the best. Fire and water, they making war here behind my eye. The bottle should promise a better life, but these tears they cannot lie. Sing to them all.
Welcome to Talking EthiX with Zack and Corrie. That is ethics with an X. And this podcast is brought to you by the EthiXApp. A warm welcome to our guest here it's not this evening, today, Advocate Werner Bouwer, and he is a director of Nexus Forensic Services, and he's going to share with us here today a very important due diligence system that him and his colleagues have developed. Over to you, Werner.
No, wacht. Before we get into that, I mean, we'll talk about Nexus and everything else later, and even the app. Werner just got here, man. Werner, tell us about yourself, bro. Where are you from? Where were you born? How did you get into this forensic business?
All right, let's start with where I was born. I can actually pronounce it. I was born in Cabrera, Port Elizabeth.
Cabrera?
Yeah. It was many years ago, so I don't want to go into that. But yes, I was at the National Prosecuting Authority for most of my career. And
the NPA, was that when the Scorpions were still...
Correct, yes. Yeah. And then it was, at a certain stage I decided to specialize in white-collar crime because like all prosecutors, you do everything, from theft from a shop to murder and everything else. I started to specialize in white-collar crime, and my last position was in the High Court in Pretoria, Senior State Advocate, and there I joined the Third Force Task Team, where we investigated alleged apartheid crimes, and I resigned early, I think 2000, I can't even recall, and then I joined the private sector for forensics, and then I joined Nexus in, I think it was 17 years ago.
Oh,
sure.
Whatever the maths is for that.
Yeah, he's been there for a long time.
He has. But now, what is white-collar crime?
White-collar crime is a reference to fraud and corruption, theft of money. If you steal a car, it's not white-collar crime.
Is it more sort of management and those sorts of things?
Correct.
Yeah, we're talking big bucks here.
Big bucks. We're talking and corruption. It includes corruption as well. So, that's basically what it is.
And you were the prosecutor in the court at that time?
Yes, one of them. I mean, we were quite a big team. I started with a white-collar crime in Cape Town, where I was a year. And then I came up to the Director of Public Prosecution's office here. And at the end, after I resigned, I mean, there was a specialized commercial crime unit, and there's still a lot of prosecutors specializing in that. So, yeah.
What made you leave? What?
I think it's the private sector. I mean, I wanted to get out of the private sector to the private sector and expand my knowledge and experience, and glad I did it.
That's
still
good.
there.
Good.
Sometimes you think otherwise, but it's still good. It's still good.
Sounds scary, man. Imagine being caught there, right there while you're stealing.
Yeah, no, it is. It had its moments. Yeah.
Sure.
So and Nexus, what does Nexus mean, or where's the word come from?
The Nexus is Latin for link, and it's linking the dots. It's creating the links between facts and evidence and coming to a conclusion. So that's the word Nexus. It's a word that's used a lot in names by companies, and that's where the name comes from, and I think it's quite apt as to what we do, obtaining evidence.
Okay, and tell us a bit about your award last year. You got an award last year, right?
Yeah, we were quite proud of that.
December.
It was the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, the ACFE in South Africa. They have a local chapter here. It's a global organization where it's like auditors, where they have the SAICA and the IRBAS, where they are chartered accountants and they do auditing. We have the ACFE and we are Certified Fraud Examiners Association. And we were nominated and we won the prize for the most successful firm. I think the names are on the certificate, or not, but for 2022.
Corporate Member of the Year, Private Sector.
Corporate Member of the Year, Private Sector, and we were quite proud of that because
sure.
we are a small firm, have been a small firm, and we want to keep it that way. That's the way we want to go. But we were quite proud.
I'm sure, and so you should be. So just tell me now, when you join the dots, what does that actually mean? Talk us through this dot to this dot to this dot. What does that entail?
Let me give you an example. I think it's an apt example in South Africa where you would find evidence of a procurement process not being complied with, as an example. They didn't go out on 3 bids. And then you get the evidence that it was so blatant that you start wondering, but why would this person who controlled the process or who signed off take that risk of losing his job by not complying so blatantly, because it wasn't even hidden. And then you start investigating, and then you get other evidence from other sources. So you have this evidence of non-compliance. The other evidence is, as an example, the person's wife is a shareholder in the company that won the bid. And then you connect the dots, because then you get the answer to the question of why did he do it. We have a saying in the forensic field: you always have to answer the questions why, what, when, how, and who. Then you answer the questions, and the why question is sometimes left out. People stop with what did the person do, who did it, when did they do it, how did they do it. But the why is, it's not as simple as to say it's always greed.
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
So when you investigate, do you use like lie detectors and all that?
Polygraph is admissible in disciplinary proceedings, not criminal. So we do use it sometimes. It's when the scenario leans itself to it. When you have other evidence and the person gives his permission, because you need permission, then we would get polygraphists. We call them that.
Okay.
But that's quite interesting. That's a very interesting field.
You would go to prison. You're so clumsy.
Then I'd like to know why. You were talking about the why. And these people, do they think they're not going to get caught? Or do they think, what do they think? That they're just going to do it and no one will know? Or why?
There's quite a little bit of science that went into that, answering that question. And the ICFE, for instance, has a fraud triangle where they would say, and this is oversimplifying it, but they would say where any fraud is committed, there's opportunity and there's rationalization and there's pressure. So what that basically means, an example is pressure is we all need more money, we want to improve our lifestyles, and that is a good thing. It's nothing wrong with that. When I do training, I always ask the persons who earns enough salary. It's a kind of a catch-22 call or question. And some of us decide to augment their income through nefarious means, and others decide to let's work for it harder. So that's the pressure side. In the forensic industry, sometimes, as an example, where there's 2 people that contributes to the homestead and the one they divorce maybe, and the person that's not the breadwinner is left alone to pay the bills.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
risk
Yeah.
of that person committing fraud increases exponentially immediately.
Okay.
So, but that's a little bit of science. It's obviously not always so, but it's the risk, it's the possibility that it may happen. So that's the fraud risk that goes into it. And then
It's like the thing where why do good people do bad things?
Correct.
It's an extension of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good correlation. And then rationalization, I think it comes more to your question. I have never found a person that thought he would be caught.
Really?
What I did find is they start small, and then they become bolder and bolder and bolder. The amounts of money that they steal becomes bigger and bigger, and they become more brazen.
So you
And,
start with like the proverbial old pencil,
Yes.
and then it becomes the paper, and then it becomes the block of paper, and then it becomes the computer, and then it becomes
Correct.
Right.
And you will find people I've heard people in interviews say, I'm so glad that I was caught at the end of the day because it became like a sickness and I couldn't stop it. I don't believe that, because you don't steal and continue stealing just to get in jail. I think it's a cop-out, and I think it's a little bit of rationalization. Rationalization means technically rationalizing what you are doing. For instance, I have not been paid a bonus this year, and everybody is doing it, and everybody gets away, and nothing is being done about it. That old thing of doing nothing.
Yeah.
If you see that in an organization, it's one of the biggest triggers for what we call impunity. Impunity is fearlessness. Is nothing's going to happen, so why can't I take the risk? Let's just go with it.
Consequences.
So, Werner, you say they keep wanting more and more and more.
Yeah.
Let's talk figures. What are we talking about?
No, it's endless. It depends on how much power you have and how much delegations in the bigger scheme of things. That old adage of power corrupts and absolute power corrupts, absolutely,
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah.
And that's not a country thing or it's a global, it's historic, it's always been like that, and it will always be like that. So.
But do you get to recover the money?
Well, depends on your structures and law enforcement. I think we are all in South Africa. We are aware of the challenges we are experiencing currently. I think it's all over the news, so we don't have to debate that. But at the end of the day, the organizations themselves, private sector, try to recover the money as soon as possible. There's a saying in the forensic field as well. When you hear about fraud in an organization, there's three things that you must do in this chronological order. Get the person out, meaning get his access to the systems and the tools away. That can happen in many ways. Secondly, recover the funds. And thirdly, open a criminal case, because we have to. It's the right thing to do. And when you open a criminal case, you don't necessarily have control over what happened, because that's in law enforcement's hands. So, but the recovering of funds is quite important because of the scale of what has been happening.
It's huge. I mean, the figures that people throw around, how many houses could be built, or how many roads could be built, or how many people can go to school, be fed at school, how many pit latrine toilets could have been built,
Exactly.
all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Just the ACFE, you say is a global entity.
Yeah.
Are you in touch with them often? I mean, all over the world, do you speak to each other? Or how does it work?
Not internationally, but we do liaise a lot with the SA chapter because we are all members. We're a corporate member, and we do quite a lot of liaison. We also have a training academy, and we are asked for training by the ACFE and the other body in South Africa, the Institute for Commercial Forensic Practitioners. So yeah, it's quite. We talk a lot, and the forensic industry is quite small. So
Okay. Okay, but do you have someone from that who talks overseas? I'm just where I'm going with this question is a bit like with the Guptas going to the Middle East or something like that. Do you have a chapter you can talk to about them there, or how would it work?
I'm not too sure. I do know that there's a lot of international conferences where the ICFE people go to, and they subscribe to that. So yeah, but I'm not too sure about the level of communication.
Okay. Right, tell us about Nexus Intel. Have you got anything else you'd like to add there?
Now we can go to Nexus Intel.
Thank you, let's go. Okay, Nexus Intel. Now this sounds very interesting, and thank you for sending us the video and all that sort of stuff and information on it. Just explain it to us in layman's terms.
All right, so I'm going to explain it practically with an example. There's a big urge and need in the private sector and the public sector that we need to enable people to detect fraud quicker so that we can respond quicker. And this due diligence tool is all about that. It's enabling people to detect conflicts of interest timeously, not only detecting it after the transaction happened and after the payment happened, but before the payment, when you are supposed to do due diligence, in the wife in the supplier example, do an ID search in the CIPC database. It's all open source intelligence.
Of the person who's delivering the goods or going to... that I was going to ask you, how do you go forward and backwards, as it were?
So it's all open source and it's credit bureau data, which means if you do a search on my ID and you do a search on my wife's ID, you will see there's an address that links us. And that's all open source. And that's the kind of detail that we want people to say, okay, but this director shares an address with one of the employers in this organization, employees. So we need to do something here because there might be a conflict of interest. And that's where the ethical questions come in from, did he disclose this interest? Was there transparency in the procurement process? And that's where the investigation would go to at the end. And there's obviously a lot of oversimplifying what I'm saying now because there are a lot of searches that you can do. You would have a financial institution, for instance. You all know the KYC.
But know your customer.
Know your customer. If you want to go and apply for a cell phone number, you have to give your address and your ID number and your water and lights and FICA and all that. And the FICA regulations actually were amended recently to also ask for politically exposed persons.
Yes, I see that. Yeah.
So a politically exposed person is somebody that had, also oversimplifying, but it's defined in the FICA regulations, somebody that in the recent month or year had a high, powerful position in government, or a related party to that person. So as an example, a municipal manager or councillor in a municipality is a political appointee. The wife of the councillor would be a related party. So what that means is when we talk about PEP searches, that's what we talk about. Let's say I'm a councillor in the municipality and that municipality, before they do business with a company, let's say ABC, they must do a search to see whether the director or the shareholder in that company is linked to a politically exposed person.
And that's what PEP stands for.
That's what PEP stands for.
Person.
And this system that we use is great. You actually, on a PEP search, you only put in the name and it gives you a score. And it gives you the negative media exposure of Werner Bouwer said this, and he's actually registered as a PEP on the watch lists. There are watch lists listing PEPs, and you have the information. And what that means, it doesn't preclude you from doing business with that company, but the rules say now you have to do a little bit enhanced due diligence.
Okay.
But now, what's like the window period that you have to wait as a politically exposed person? How long would you have to wait before you can do business with the company?
You can do business. There's no blanket prohibition. It's just enhanced due diligence that's required. So the rules don't say you are not allowed to do business at all. But when you are a municipal employee and you have an interest in a company, the rules differ, then you are not allowed to do business at all. So there's no window period. It's like you can never.
Sure.
And I do know, as far as I recall, the government is also, the provincial government and state-owned entities and national departments are looking to also implement those rules, similar rules.
Gosh. And how do people, what do they do to get hold of this, and who would typically need something like this?
So anybody that works in procurement needs that, because they are the custodians of the procurement process. Internal audit are the custodians of compliance and good governance. Ethics officers. And I do know that the portfolios of ethics officers differ in different organizations. Some of them are on a higher level and not forensically. So it depends. But anybody who needs to do investigations, who needs to validate or verify, or what we call in the industry combined assurance.
Right.
Combined assurance is we need to give business the assurance that there's nothing untoward happening here. All of those. It could be HR, for instance. Qualification verifications. That's something that we're going to add now. We're in the process of adding it.
Yeah, I see.
CV fraud, I don't have to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
That's
So
a
it'll
big
pick
issue.
all of that up. You can take a CV, you can look at it, and you'll know that this person is not talking.
Yeah, and you get the information directly from the third parties.
Okay.
Even bank account verifications, but not in any way that it infringes privacy. You have, for instance, you have to have the bank account number and the name, and then the system will tell you, is that name linked to that number, as an example.
Right.
At least it gives you it's not siphoned, the money is not siphoned to another bank account.
Right. Okay. Our of personal information, we've got that. Who's your partner? You spoke about a partner that you've developed this with.
Our partner is the Consumer Profile Bureau, CPB. They are a registered credit bureau. So the POPIA, Personal Protection of Personal Information Act, that's privacy. So you can't just get your bank account number and go into your bank statements. That's simply not acceptable because it's unlawful.
Right.
So you have to follow certain procedures, and there are certain exemptions that you have to comply with before you process personal information. If I punch an ID number, your ID number, and I want to see what interest you have in a company, then there are certain rules that I have to follow. For instance, I can only use that information for the purpose that I get it, and for no other purpose, I'm not allowed to leak it to something or leak it to the press, as an example. So that's where the POPI comes in, and CPB is fully accredited and registered with POPI.
Okay.
So you investigate me, I need to give you permission to go to do that?
No.
Oh.
The permission, there are exemptions in POPI. Normally, yes, you must give permission, but I don't have to give you your permission.
No way. No way I give you permission.
I don't have to have your permission if I do a fraud prevention and fraud detection exercise. But then I have to obviously be bona fide, and I have to really do it for that purpose. And it's because, like any right to privacy, any right has the counter obligations and the rights of other parties. It's like, when can I monitor your emails as an employer? When can I record your conversations as an employer? These legislative measures are in RICA. We all know what RICA is. And in the Credit Act regulations and in POPI itself. And it says the employer has a right to safeguard its assets, and employer must, in certain instances, investigate and verify to protect your assets and to actually foster an ethical culture. That's also an obligation. And that is why the rights are limited to a certain extent.
So when can a conversation be recorded and when not?
When I talk to you
Yeah.
directly over a phone, I can record it,
Okay.
and I don't have to ask your permission because we call it participant monitoring in RICA. But if you do talk with one another and you are not aware of me being in the immediate vicinity, and I record your conversation, that's illegal because it's third-party monitoring.
Okay.
Yeah, then it's going to be a problem. Then you need a warrant or a subpoena.
When you go to the judge, and like the American movies, they will go to the judge and say, please, we need
There's a directive in RICA that requires approval by a judge for accessing that conversation.
Tell me, Werner, how do you hack cell phones? Sometimes I'm on a phone, I feel like there's a third person listening to the conversation. How do you do that?
Look, I'm not a cyber expert, so I wouldn't know if how you do it. That's quite a high level of expertise that you require. I do know it's possible, but you have to have legislative authority to do that, and the powers to do
So you have to go to a judge or something.
Correct.
And they have to get
Yeah. And it's quite sophisticated tools, and I think it's very expensive, so I don't know. I'm not too sure.
This might be a very simplistic question, but if we're talking and you over there and you can hear what we say and you go and report us, then it just becomes a he said, she said type of thing. Or how does that work? Is there anything in law where that is valid?
Well, the hearsay rule is, well, if you talk about whistleblowing, I think one of the big things about whistleblowing is if I suspect something, I can report it, and I should report it. There's a duty on me to report if I'm an employee. But the moment that you start testifying in hearings and I don't have personal knowledge, as an example, and you maybe told him that Peter stole 50,000 rand. I don't know whether Peter stole 50,000, and the only way that I know about that is I overheard you saying that.
Yeah.
So now I go and testify, and somebody wants to present my evidence as the truth that Peter wanted to steal 50,000 rand. That's hearsay evidence. That's inadmissible in general.
Okay.
Because then one of you will have to come and testify.
Okay.
But otherwise, whistleblowing is something different. I have a duty to report that, and then that triggers an investigation, which precedes hearings and stuff.
Would your new system help whistleblowers?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Because what whistleblowers have been, what employees have been saying for many years as justification not to report something is I cannot prove it. So therefore I'm going to keep quiet, I'm going to do nothing, which is one of the biggest mistakes we can make. We should know in South Africa that's a big mistake. And the big thing about Nexus Intel is it gives you tangible evidence to base your suspicion on reasonable grounds. I have a suspicion that this person, as the wife example, broke the rules, and it was extremely brazen, and everybody can see he broke the rules. The question is why? Do a due diligence quickly. It's as simple as sitting in front of your computer, clicking a few buttons. Turnaround time is immediate in most searches. Here's the evidence. Now I can blow the whistle because I feel more comfortable that I actually have a disclosure that I can make that will be protected in terms of the Protected Disclosures Act, as an example.
So, because that's a big thing in South Africa, is the fear Because whistleblowers, President Ramaphosa said something the other day about we're going to support whistleblowers. They've been saying it for years. But it just goes on and on and on, not supporting whistleblowers. Why do you think that is, Werner? Why is there no will to stop these things? Is it just all fear, or what is it?
I have been asking myself that question since, and I actually can't remember. I've been involved with whistleblowing and fraud awareness sessions and trying to get people to do the right thing by blowing the whistle and making the reports. And the employees that I have been training since many years ago, that classroom experience that you get where people start saying, but you come to us and you tell us we must report, because that's true, they must report and they have this duty to report, then they start, but do you know how it is here? We can't report. We are scared because of A, B, C, D, E, which are valid.
Yes,
some are invalid, some are valid. And what I saw and detected, which was quite terrifying for me, was employers have a duty to make their employees aware of their reporting duties and to give them systems and tools to report, which we all know, the hotlines, etc. But they do that and they say that, but they never tell the employees how they will be protected. And how the protection in the protected.
Do you think that's by design? Do you think they do it on purpose? Or
the employers themselves, I think it is by being ignorant.
Okay.
Actually, of how the Protected Disclosures Act really works and what really is required to remove that barrier of fear. Okay. The government, politically, I think there are other reasons. I don't think, and we all know, you're not going to find transparency in politicians. We all know that. And that's what whistleblowing is all about. It's about transparency and about empowering people to actually blow the whistle and to be the watchdogs. Watchdogs is the wrong word, but to be to do what they are supposed to do. Is because employees are the first line of defense. So I think there are definitely a lack of a political will, because the question would always be, what's the risk in it for us? What might come out? How are we going to deal with that? I mean, we've seen it in South Africa. So.
But it's a bit like that all over the world.
It is. It's not. It is absolutely. It's not a South Africa specific problem. So that's why it's a journey always. Really creating that environment in an organisation where employees feel there's a safe space. It's a never-ending exercise. It's communication and awareness and action. Action is the most important thing, which we don't see. That's the problem.
And consequences.
Correct. Consequence management.
There seems to be no consequence. It's something like, how can we fix that? It's a mindset, isn't it? Consequence management is the biggest issue. I think for ethical culture, because we are excellent in making legislation, rules. We have our Corruption Act, for instance, is one of the best written in the world. It's a very good piece of legislation. But has it been implemented? Has there been prosecutions? No. It's an endemic problem. It's like whistleblowing. Why does hotline programs not work? Because there's no real empowerment of citizens. There's no action. There's no... you still get the golden handshakes of the CEO who stole 5 million, but the cleaner who stole
500 Rand is fired immediately. That's an example. And consequence management is one of those big things. You simply don't get that. People are fired in one place or they resign and then they join it. As long as that is not going to be
would your system is starting to address those issues, right?
It will, because it will give you the information to act and respond quicker.
Okay.
And the moment you have that information quicker and more easily, then you can respond quicker. And there's what I always quote. They say to create an ethical culture is all about response. It's not about words. It's not about talking. It's about walking. That's the old adage that we all know.
Yeah.
And that response is cemented in action. It's how do you respond to a suspicion? Even before you have a hotline report, how do you respond to a suspicion? And how do you get there quicker in getting the information to respond more effectively? Stop the bleeding before you actually lose all your money. If you see the red flags, act. And if you see the red flags, identify it for what it is. That it's fraud. It's not only, maybe the person just made a mistake. How many times does he make a mistake, as an example? But that's another discussion. You get there quicker. And that's I think very important that the tool does.
Just a little thing, you said not to talk, but don't you think talking starts getting people to actually start using a tool or using something,
yes, yeah.
Education, so I suppose you need that kind of change of people talking to each other, and then they go into like we're not going to act, but maybe we should act. Let's act. Okay, let's act. Okay, that's a short conversation, but could have been a longer one. It takes place over 3 months or something like that, and until eventually, you know what, I think I should do. Yeah, I think you should do. I think you should do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But now, just a quick one. Where would this thing sit in a company? Your system sit in a company for someone to use it as a whistleblower?
Whistleblower can be any person.
Right.
But I don't think you can give all the employees access to the system.
Right.
Because what is nice about the system is it gives the employer control over online control over monitoring whether a person can abuse it. So maybe you have 5 or 10 users or 500 users. If you have 10,000 employees, there's an immutable audit trail of each and every ID number or each and every search that's done. So, and it also gives you control over the cost. That's the big thing that huge organizations miss. If you have this ad hoc, let's do a property search on this person as a lifestyle or that person. That ad hoc once-off searches doesn't work. It's not a concerted effort, a group-wide effort. So, to answer your question, where it can sit, it depends. It depends on the organization, its structures, where does combined assurance sit. Internal forensic teams of organizations, very important that they have it, because preliminary verifications are quite important in any investigation. All the forensic guys know that. Secondly, it can also sit with HR because of their function to verify qualifications, and then you can only give them certain searches. You can give procurement certain other searches, only what they need, and only what they require to discharge their obligation. That's the nice thing, because it's tailorable and it can really assist you. And the turnaround time is, in most instances, immediate. That's nice.
Of course.
Do you find that people use the system to give false reports? Say he does something to me, then I set him up to get back at him?
You can't, because if you, for instance, allege he has a conflict and here I'm just talking simplistically now about an example. If you say, draw this report, and this is my as a basis for my report, the whistleblowing. And it doesn't show that he or his wife has an interest. People are going to see it immediately, so it would be nonsensical to make that report.
And where do they find this? Where do they find you? How do they find you?
It's Nexus Intelligence on the Nexus Forensics website,
Yeah.
and info@Nexus. There's an email address. I think we're on social media. LinkedIn. Nexus has a Facebook page. Nexus Forensic Services. So you can just go there.
So what do you think, just a broad question here, Werner, what do you think about the future of South Africa in terms of fraud, corruption, ethics? What do you think, where do you think we're going?
Well, I think we're at a better place than we were 5-6 years ago. I think we're in a painful process now. I think we are in that process where we are talking about it and we are becoming aware of the depth of the problem. And to go back to what you said earlier about talking about it first, if you go to any fraud prevention program in an organization, because people want to prevent fraud now, they say they don't want to only react to it, they want to prevent it. How do we do that? Communication campaign. How do we start a communication campaign? Talking. Awareness, training, debates. There's a lot of ways to do that.
Our ethics app as well is
exactly
that.
Exactly that. And then after that, the action must start coming.
Right.
We're talking about it. We decide we are now going to do this. We are now going to do that. We are employees may, for instance, let's all sign a pledge that we are going to blow the whistle now. Let's do that. It just makes people aware, and then doing the right thing becomes easier.
Yeah.
So talking is first, and then doing what you said you're going to do.
Right.
And I think that's where we are in South Africa. But the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunately not dependent on us. It's dependent on the powers to be, and I just hope that is
They come through.
flowed through.
Yeah, because I mean, you're doing a wonderful thing here. The whistleblower house has got a wonderful system going there. I just wish more people would come on board, and that's what I was trying to ask earlier: is why are the people not coming on board? What is the? It's and that's what. Once we get the answer to that, then we can start moving ahead, I think. And this, what we're doing here now, is also going to help. We're going to say that people must start talking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can just that question of why people don't come. It's really an indictment on us, South Africa, on why there's not more investment to protect whistleblowers. There was I actually can't remember the organization's name, but there was a non-profit organization many years ago that had to oversee the implementation of the Protected Disclosures Act in organizations. Okay. And the government stopped funding that many years ago. And now the Protected Disclosures Act is, I think, I can't even remember, it's a 2003 piece of legislation.
Yeah.
Many years ago.
Yeah.
When you go to employees now, and you tell them about that, there's still some of them that wouldn't know about it.
Yeah.
And then you ask the question, but why? How's that possible? And then you see where the money goes to and where the money is invested. But when it comes to really whistleblowing awareness campaigns and empowering whistleblowers, it's not going there. A lot of talk, and a whistleblowing policy that says, yeah, you must report. Okay. Is that where you're going to leave me?
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
So,
I just wanted to ask you, Werner. A lot of the CEOs in this country have only now stepped to the fore. It's taken a long, long time. Do you think that might be the fear that we spoke about earlier, or is that just because there was no real channel?
I actually don't know. I can't answer that. A lot of things happened recently with the whole Eskom debacle, and this whole incentive from private sector now that you are referring to. I think there's definitely a perception that there is a channel now, but that channel has been there a little bit earlier as well, so I'm not too sure. But the point is, it can never only depend on the private sector, because at the end of the day, the power is in government to make the rules and make the legislation and direct the funding to make a difference. Yeah.
There seems to be a move. There does seem to be some sort of move in government where it is changing, the shifting slightly. Do you agree that there's some sort of shift, or is it also
no,
just?
No, there's definitely a shift. I mean, like I said, I think that we are in a better place than we were a few years ago. But I'm still thinking, why are we? I saw an article the other day where there's content in the media about the Protected Disclosures Act is not sufficient enough. And then I wonder, how long does it take you to
come up with that?
To come up with that, because the substance of the act there were amendments, but the substance never changed. And if you don't implement legislation and you don't make work of it, then you are not going to make a difference.
Yeah.
It's like the rule of law. The rule of law is not that the law exists, it's about how you implement it.
Yes.
The corruption legislation, there's a reporting duty on CEOs and people in authority to report criminal offence, fraud and corruption. What happens with those cases?
What does happen? Nothing.
Well, that's certainly the perception.
Yeah.
So, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Well, Werner, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks.
No, we'll have you back again once we know how the system is working. We'll come and give us a report back.
Thanks.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, Nexus Intel. We'll put the contact details on the screen for you now. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Fire and water, they making war. Here behind my eye. The bottle she promised a better life, but these tears they cannot lie. Sing to them.